Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly, by from the SNP Socialist Group, Chris McCusker. Chris, how are you doing?
Good evening, Comrade Kenny. How are we?
I'm not bad at all. And on the other side, we have human rights activist Pinar Aksu. Pinar, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Hope you're well too.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have both of you here. And we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 738,733 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 713,238 were confirmed negative, 25,495 were positive. There were 486 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly 2 new reported deaths. This will be, of course, an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not everyone will necessarily get themselves tested, although we do urge you, as usual, if you have symptoms, please do book a test as quickly as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 83 people in hospital last night, 10 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 2,508. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,862 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 37 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And we also have the weekly report from National Records of Scotland for week 38 of the year, which was the week ending the 20th of September. In this week, there were 11 deaths linked to the novel coronavirus in Scotland, an increase of 6 from the previous week. 6 of these deaths had already been reported in the Scottish Government's daily reporting, and 3 of the deaths occurred in care homes, with 8 occurring in hospitals. The R number in Scotland is now estimated to be between 1.1 and 1.4. The R number represents the average number of people infected by each positive case. It must remain below 0 to avoid the growing spread of the virus. Case numbers have also been rising significantly, with today's tally of 486 being the highest number of new cases in one day since the beginning of the pandemic, although this may be slightly misleading as there is substantially more testing happening now than at the previous peak. And normally we would just move on at this point, but Pinar, I wonder, what do you make of this sudden rise over the last week or two in case numbers? How worried do you think we should be?
I mean, in terms of being across the country, I think with the opening of the schools and especially having the pubs open as well, that contributed a lot for the increase in rising of the numbers. However, with the recent announcement, as you mentioned, which we might talk about it later, these restrictions might be able to stop it. But I'm still fearful that not closing the pubs and especially not having the restrictions on the schools might still contribute towards the increase of numbers.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think everyone expected that some of this reopening of the economy and particularly people going back to school, going back to university, might lead to some rise in cases, but I think the rise has been a bit more than a lot of people were expecting, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, Kenny. But it's a fine line and a fine balancing act that the First Minister has to calculate because everybody realises the fact that the economy has to reopen. However, however small that opening is, people need to work and people need services. But the act of trying to get people to behave responsibly is a really tough task because people, due to maybe not apathy, but many people, due to just the length that the restrictions have gone on, they are beginning to sort of lapse into old habits and stuff like that. I mean, personally, from my own point of view, I would have liked to have seen the whole country just go back into, an actual sort of full 2 week shop lockdown, and see what becomes of that.
Yeah. Well, we will talk about some of this as we go on, but if you would like to join the conversation here on Scotland at 7, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland at 7. That's hashtag Scotland AT and the number 7. And as you can see, we will be flashing some of those tweets up on the screen as we go. But our first story tonight, with just 100 days to go until the end of the Brexit transition period, the Scottish Government has criticised the UK Government's reckless refusal to consider any extension to the transition, while the coronavirus pandemic continues and further restrictions are introduced. Constitution Secretary Michael Russell said, "In the midst of the global pandemic, it is an act of extraordinary recklessness for the UK Government to end the Brexit transition period in 100 days. The UK Government is fully prepared to add to the distress of COVID-19 with the economic damage and dislocation of Brexit. As a responsible government, we will continue to do everything we can to mitigate against the consequences of the end of the transition period, but we simply cannot avert every negative consequence of the UK Government's policy. As we contemplate the damage of Brexit being willingly added to the damage and distress of the COVID-19 pandemic, fundamentally, the Scottish Government view is that the best future for Scotland is to become an independent country." It comes after the UK Government's own analysis described UK hauliers facing 7,000 truck queues at Dover and 2-day delays for goods leaving the UK for the EU. The analysis also stated that only 20 to 40% of small and medium-sized businesses would be fully prepared for whatever the UK's new relationship with the EU will be. Meanwhile, a report published today by the UK and a Changing Europe group concluded that a no-deal outcome would lead to risks of queues and shortages of food, and that in the long run, Brexit is likely to be more significant than COVID-19. Chris, I think we'll come to you first here. This is 100 days. It's really not a long time, and we still don't even know what the arrangements are going to be on January the 1st. How worried are you that even if a deal was done now, as the UK government claims is still possible, it's going to be very difficult for businesses to make proper preparations for the change to happen?
Well, I don't want to be the scaremonger of doom, but there is no deal better than the deal that we already had. I think that's very plain, and the SNP have constantly made that case. Any deal that Boris Johnson comes out with is going to be a shadow of the current deal that we enjoyed as members of the EU. But what gets me is the fact that the constituents of Kent, an area that I know very well, as I used to drive through it on my way down to Dover when I was going over to help the refugees in Calais and Dunkirk. That is not what they signed up for. I don't believe in a month of Sundays that they signed up to have a border between the M25 and the M40. And that quintessentially is exactly what has happened today with the announcement of these travel permits that must be obtained by lorry drivers in order to drive through from the M25 onto the M40 and then down on further going on to Dover and Folkestone. So and what we will see, and I actually put this out as a joke tweet this afternoon, but it's really no joke. What we are going to see is the fact that the British economy is going to be booming due to the fact that they will need to be building so many garage garages in order to house the 7,000 trucks and the economy could possibly be bolstered by the greasy spoon cafes selling cups of tea and bacon rolls for the lorry drivers.
Yeah, I mean, Pinar, this announcement today that there is going to be effectively, you're going to need a special passport to enter Kent in a goods lorry. It's an extraordinary concept, isn't it? That I think none of us were quite prepared for just how extraordinary some of these developments were going to be.
Absolutely, and what it seems like is adding another layer of border and having another way of controlling the movement of people. And of course, obviously, this is going to have a huge impact on the local people and potentially on people's health and well-being as well. And it just creates the ideology of having extra borders and having this idea of another version of a passport that needs to be controlled. And it's really worrying, to be honest, and to see that where UK is heading towards when we are out of the European Union. It's going to be really interesting, but this is just the start on and the indication that we are not heading towards anywhere good.
Well, we move on to a related story. SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford has said that Boris Johnson is facing a winter of discontent, with 1 million jobs at risk if furlough ends as planned, the £30 billion per year costs of a no-deal Brexit, and 7,000 trucks joining the queue at Dover each day. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions today, Mr Blackford said that First Minister Nicola Sturgeon had shown leadership throughout the pandemic, but that the responsibility and powers over the furlough scheme and Brexit lie with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, and that they must announce an immediate extension to the furlough scheme to provide security for workers and businesses facing new coronavirus restrictions. SNP Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Neil Gray pointed out that as yet the UK government has offered no new support to businesses facing these new restrictions, while Patrick Grady MP reminded the Prime Minister of his refusal to devolve borrowing powers to the Scottish Government and said he was therefore responsible for any job losses that were to come. Now, we have heard just in the last hour or so that Rishi Sunak is meant to be making a statement tomorrow about some changes to the support that's going to be available. But Pinar, it's still kind of a little bit too little too late. There's a lot of businesses that have already made people redundant on the basis that they were going to run out of furlough money at the end of October.
Yes, and what seems that is this is going to be a lot more long-term issues. We don't know how long this might be taking. That there's talk of at least another 6 months that we're going to be in restricted lockdown, and there are going to be many businesses and many people impacted. And it's like the domino effect, if you know what I mean, in terms of if you can't pay the rent, then obviously the landlords get affected, and then you have the businesses and places eventually will be end up closing. And I've got a friend, for example, he owns a barber shop, and he sadly was unaware of the business support that was given to the owners. And that's one case. That's just one case, and the reason why he was late is because he just took the day out, and it was meant to be going on for 1 year, but then they decided that this extra support is no longer in place. So there's also lack of information for people in terms of withdrawing any other fundings for businesses. And like I said, we're going to see a lot of people falling into poverty, and we need more support in place if this is going to be the case. And as you have indicated as well, there needs to be more powers into the Scottish Government if we want to have a fair society, at least in Scotland.
And Chris, today, of course, in the Scottish Parliament, the Conservatives were basically telling the SNP or the Scottish Government to get on with the day job and stop talking about the Constitution. But at the same time, the UK government has been absolutely determined to keep going with this constitutional wreckage of Brexit while the coronavirus pandemic is going on. I mean, the EU would have been quite happy to extend the transition for even a short period, but the British government has been just resolute in saying, no, it must happen at the end of this year. There's a bit of hypocrisy there, isn't there?
just ever so slightly, Kenny. But the other side of the coin as well is the fact that the British government have been portraying the EU to be the bad guy. And I actually alluded to this may happen, early last year, and at the fact that Boris Johnson cannot get the deal that he purports to have brokered, because if you remember, the couple of months ago, the deal was oven ready. And it was, just ready to go. And the EU were going to sign up to it. It would allow us to do free trade with America. We would have a Canada-style deal that would be, revered throughout the world. And what do we see? We see a lack of clarity and leadership from the British government. It basically doesn't know its arse for its elbow. And we have the Scottish government pointing out the obvious is that, as Patrick Grady said, it would be the Scottish government at fault when at least 1 million jobs are lost in Scotland due to the fact that there is no clarity and leadership from Westminster, because they are so blinkered in refusing Scotland to have its own fiscal autonomy in order to have the borrowing powers, so that we can actually make the choices which are quintessentially nuanced down to our communities and our economic needs.
And Chris, just quite quickly, the UK has said that they are confident of getting a deal. The EU has said today that they are still determined that a deal can be done. Do you have any confidence that, as we've seen the EU do before, that something can be pulled out of the bag in the last minute, and that's going to make things okay?
No, not at all, Kenny. It's a game of chicken. And basically, it's the British government in a small Austin Minor car facing a juggernaut of SNCF railway engine. They are going to be ploughed over. The EU are not going to give in at the last minute, no matter what the UK government think or say, because at the end of the day, it's not the deal that Britain wishes to do with the EU. That's gone out the window now. What is now at the heart of it is the fact that the UK have openly admitted that they have broke international law, and they are willing to put the peace process in Northern Ireland right up front and centre. And if that is tampered with in any such way, shape or form, they will get no help from the EU. They will get little help from the USA. We've seen several high-ranking politicians in the USA saying that a deal will not be even thought about if they tinker around with the Good Friday Agreement. So they're on a hiding to nothing. And again, I hate to be the doom monger, but I'm sorry, folks, but it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And what I would want to see is that I know it won't happen on the 31st of December. I'm realistic to know that the House of Commons don't sit on the 31st of December. But I really just want all the SNP MPs to just pick up all the laptops, all the papers, and just walk out and just say, we're not playing anymore. This just isn't. There is nothing to argue for anymore. Yeah. There is just simply nothing to argue for anymore. And the argument should be made that Scotland should be an independent Republic of Scotland because we choose to be welcoming and inclusive, and we wish to choose a different path from the right-wing narrative that's coming out of Westminster.
Well, we move on to our next story now, and the Treasury has scrapped plans for an autumn budget this year because of the coronavirus pandemic, according to a report by the BBC. There will, however, be a spending review to set out the overall shape of government spending, BBC political editor Laura Kuenssberg reported. A Treasury source told the BBC, "No one wanted to be in this situation, but we need to respond to it. The Chancellor has shown he has been creative in the past, and we hope that people will trust us to continue in that vein." The source also said that giving people reassurance and businesses the help they need was uppermost in the Chancellor's mind. The announcement provoked an angry response from Scottish Finance Secretary Kate Forbes, who tweeted, "This decision is breathtaking in its disregard for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. If there is no UK budget, how are devolved governments meant to set our own budgets? Local government, the NHS, taxpayers all depend on confirmation of spending and tax plans." And Peter, Kate Forbes came into this job waiting on a budget that had been delayed and delayed and delayed, partly because of the election, partly for other political reasons by Westminster. And now she's potentially going to have to set her second budget, again, without knowing what the actual budget settlement with Westminster is. How do you think governments, the devolved governments, are meant to deal with this kind of dilatory behaviour by the Westminster Treasury?
Once again, it seems to be another really worrying and concerning news. And as you've said, how things are going to be put in place and how benefits and that extra support is going to be for the countries is really worrying. And this could potentially mean that more budget cut from each of the councils. I mean, we're already seeing that Glasgow City Council is putting a lot of budget cuts in a lot of organisations, and we're seeing that some of the places are being closed to make up for the budget. So this might be the case again, which potentially would be the last thing we would ever want. In terms of the way that the direction of this is not looking good again, and how it's going to look in the future is another question, and it's on and where these budget cuts are going to be made to make up for the needed amount. Another question is on. But if there is budget and finance wars to fund the military and vice versa and everything else, then they should be easily looking at finding some budget and having some options in place to actually save people's lives and to save businesses and to make the economy going.
And Chris, it does sometimes feel as though the Westminster government is just trying to make life impossible for Kate Forbes. What do you make of this?
Well, we have to be clear the fact that Westminster government will not devolve the fiscal powers that Scotland needs in order to be a successful country, because they know that if Scotland does have the fiscal powers, we would possibly outperform England on several platforms, well, not to mention GDP. Because we would want to invest. Just think of if we were allowed to invest in the renewables sector that Scotland is leading the way with, we could be a leading global player on the international market in renewable energy. And that's just down to the fact that Scotland enjoys such a windy climate. It's a complete no-brainer. Anybody who has spent time in Glasgow, just take for argument's sake today, the average temperature was, about 12.5. And down in London, we see that the temperatures were 21, 22. The actual sort of like geographics of how Britain is split up, when it comes down to the actual natural climate, then it is no wonder that Scotland would be able to be a leading light in that one sector. The other side of the coin as well is the fact that Scotland's got so much history that people from the United States of America, Chinese, they all flock over to Scotland because of what we have, what we export. Whiskey alone, not to mention the dramatic scenery that is seen in countless films, and the hospitality is known as second to none. So, it's not just based on the narrow narrative of the fact that Scotland's got oil. If anybody has ever watched the Cheviot and the Stag and the black oil, you would possibly draw comparisons between that and what's currently going on just now in Kent, where you could draw comparisons between a passport to Pimlico. Do you know what I mean? It is chalk and cheese, and Scotland has always been chalk and cheese. To England, as a distinct, we have distinct, nuanced things that we have to offer the rest of the world, not just England.
Yeah.
So there is just no way on earth that Westminster would ever devolve the powers necessary whilst we are in the actual UK union, because it would just show them up for being a complete shower of incompetence.
Well, we turn now to happenings in the European Union, and the EU has unveiled a long-awaited migration pact aiming to streamline the asylum process among member states to fix what EU leaders acknowledge is an ineffective system. The new pact aims to better share the burden of relocating asylum seekers by allowing member states to contribute by instead returning individuals who do not qualify for asylum or providing logistical support. EU leaders also hope to create faster border screening processes at the external borders. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the new pact would strike a reasonable balance with all member states sharing the benefits and burdens. She added that it wasn't a question of whether EU states should contribute, but how. Commission Vice President Margaritis Schinas said the hope would be that this is a proper, single, cohesive migration policy. Migration policy has been a difficult issue in EU politics for years, and it's possible the new migration pact will be a hard sell for the European Commission. The process has been a delicate balancing act of getting countries which have been averse to mandatory quotas like Poland, Hungary and Austria to accept migrants, while supporting countries in the south like Greece, Italy and Malta in dealing with large numbers of people arriving on their shores from the Mediterranean. And Pinar, I know migrant rights are one of your kind of key interests. What have you made of this new agreement from the EU?
I mean, once again, what it sounds is that it's another agreement and another policy in place where the states have to implement, and that's one of my biggest worries. I mean, there are so many policies and agreements in place. However, if the states and countries do not implement them, then it just ends up being another piece of paper and leaving people to suffer at the borders and at the countries that begin there. If you look at the United Nations, you have the UNHCR, you have the Global Compact, and obviously you've got with all the immigration agreements that's been outlined there. However, as you said, if the important aspect comes down to the countries to accept and also to have implementations in place once the people arrive to the countries. What we are seeing at the moment in Greece is horrendous. It's basically a crime against humanity, and it has been going on for many years with the so-called refugee crisis since 2015, which I call as the humanitarian crisis. And since then, what has the European Union done? I mean, there has been nothing. People have been sleeping in the streets in horrendous situations within their tents, and this is the end result which we have seen in the past few months, where the camp in Lesbos burnt down and it destroyed. And again, people have been fleeing war. People have crossed borders, crossed the sea from Turkey to Greece, and again, their homes have been destroyed. And what sort of support is in place for these people at the moment? There are, over 12,000 people who has nothing, and they are being left destitute. And what is the EU states doing to welcome these people who are seeking asylum and refuge is another question. On my wish is that I really do hope that this is not another policy in place, another piece of paper, that actually the countries do take on the responsibilities that they have. If it's a European Union, then all, as you indicate, all the countries need to share the people who are seeking asylum and refuge. We've seen that Germany has done this by welcoming so many people. We've seen a few other countries as well, but it's just a handful of countries. We are not seeing more countries contributing to this. What we have seen also in France as well, with the Calais camp being destroyed, people are just being left in the streets. And when we talk about, and the news reports this by saying, burden, the people, sharing of the burden, it's actually not a burden. It's actually part of human nature that people migrate and people try to find a new life and start a new life. And I think that's another important thing. The language that the media uses, especially the mainstream media, by saying the migrants, the migrant crisis, it's actually the refugee crisis, because each of the terms have different definitions. And if we actually try to change the term migrant or refugee or asylum with people in the headlines, you would then see the impact of the effect that everyone is facing. Rather than putting the label of migrant asylum, if you said that people have died or thousands of people have died, that might be another way of reaching out to local communities and actually create sympathy and empathy towards anyone fleeing from persecution. In terms of UK, obviously, UK want to be able to provide probably any sort of assistance in this. And another worrying aspect is the DUBS amendment that we are seeing, that there's a talk of not being implemented anymore, which means that all the refugee children who were supposed to come here and reunited with their parents are not going to be united. And who knows what will happen to them because of the fire that took place in the camp, all the evidences, all the documents that they probably have been building over the years are now destroyed. So that need of having that hot points and the point of support for people is crucial. I just really hope that this is going to be implemented rather than staying in words by the states.
And Chris, if I can just turn to you quite quickly, the EU historically has been quite good at sharing prosperity, but not necessarily sharing problems very well. Greece and Italy obviously have dealt with the bulk of this movement of people, this crisis of humanity, as Pinar put it. But the other countries have not necessarily been very good at meeting their responsibilities to help. The UK, of course, amongst the worst offenders. Do you think it partly, first of all, is it partly that the UK has left that has made this possible? And secondly, what are your hopes about how it actually comes into effect?
Well, the UK were, let me say, less than cooperative in the past out of any other of the 28 states within the EU in order to try and alleviate the burgeoning what can I say, exodus, basically, of refugees coming out of many countries, not just Syria, not just the countries that were in war conflict status, but also refugees that were coming out of Africa. They were also coming from southern parts of Asia as well. And what they had done was they had moved, as a migrant does, is they move from country to country in order to see what best suits them and what best suits their family, because that is at the forefront of any person's mind, is the fact that if someone is bombing the Donald Duck out of your country, or if someone is subjecting you to severe hardship, then obviously you are going to look at, what is best for your family. And if you think that moving from another country in order to see if your skills could be utilised, if you'll be welcomed, then that's what you're going to do. And when you go into another country and find out that that's not the case, you don't hang around. So you go naturally to another country and see that if it's going to be better there. And so what's happened is the fact that these poor unfortunate people have got to the point where there is a land border between France and Britain, which prevents many of the half decent minded refugees respect and say, right, we can't go any further. So we're going to make a camp here because what else can we do? And I'm sort of like telling you the history of the old jungle and the camp at the Grand Synth and at Sangat. That's what happened. Is they got to a point where they couldn't go any further, just because of land mass. And what we now, and I hate to actually bring this to everyone's attention, is the fact that the UK Home Office, just a couple of days ago, has actually issued a plan to evict thousands of asylum seekers from England that have come over here and applied for natural status. This is off the back of the nasty right-wing narrative of Nigel Farage, who is going around from hotel to hotel and basically telling the communities in that where those hotels are situated that hotel is full of asylum seekers. And he is driving the lines of hatred and division. And it's getting to the point where if Scotland is not able to be in control of its own migration, then we will be bereft of skilled workers, because many of the migrants that I've actually met and spoke to in Calais and in Dunkirk, I've met doctors, I've met lawyers, I've met mechanics, bakers, you name it. And they all just want to work. They all just want to provide for their family. And this is something that the UK government will never be able to understand.
Yeah, we were actually talking here at Broadcasting Scotland to a journalist who is unfortunately unable to take paid work. We are looking at if we can be accommodated here at Broadcasting Scotland. So yeah, as you say, there are many people who should be able to work and aren't. We'd love it if they could. We're moving on now, though. President Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus was sworn in for a 6th term today after an election that the opposition and several foreign governments say was rigged. The ceremony would normally have been publicised as a major state occasion, but was instead held without warning following Lukashenko's claim of a landslide victory in the August 9th election. The opposition, which has staged more than 6 weeks of mass protests demanding his resignation, denounced the inauguration as illegitimate and called for more demonstrations this evening. The United States and the European Union are drawing up sanctions against officials involved in the election and a subsequent crackdown by the security forces. The official news agency Belta said Lukashenko placed his right hand on a copy of the constitution and swore the oath of office at a ceremony attended by several hundred people. The 66-year-old said the country needed safety and consensus on the brink of a global crisis, an apparent reference to the COVID-19 pandemic. I have no right to abandon the Belarusians, he said. And Pinar, that line that he has no right to abandon the country when in fact the opposition believes he has no right to be where he is, really kind of strikes home what the problem is in Belarus just now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, to declare yourself as the new leader of a country where the people do not want the same outcome is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, and we've seen the human rights abuses that's been taking place over the past few weeks and months, and it's absolutely shocking that this could be happening at the moment. And what it shows is that obviously they are taking advantage of the uprising of the right-wing governments just across the world. And it's really interesting, and it's actually a move in a positive direction where what the oppositions have decided in terms of trying to create unity amongst the people and continue to raise their voices, which is what they absolutely need at the moment, rather than saying that this is the leader we have and this is how we should accept this. Kind of relating back to UK, what we had seen last year when Boris Johnson got into power, and obviously then when we heard also the Brexit as well, I believe that we need more protest. I believe that we need to raise our voice, if not physically, in different platforms and ways, to say that we do not want this government in place, and to say that we actually, if we don't want them, or if this government is going to stay in place, then as citizens of Scotland, we don't want to be part of this. And in any democratic country, we should have the mandate and we should have the right to decide once again whether we want independence or not. And hopefully this time the outcome will be yes, and we will have independence in here.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, these sanctions by the EU and the US, do you think targeting a handful of powerful Belarusian individuals is going to be enough to tip the balance against Lukashenko?
Well, no, because the one thing that Lukashenko has got in his armory, if I could use that word, is the fact that he's got the backing of Putin. And again, down to the geographics of where Belarus is actually sited, Putin has, whether he likes it or not, he has to keep, a certain sort of like beady eye on what happens there, because as we've seen before in history, the Russians love nothing more than tinkering in other people's political goings on, and borders and geography matter not a jot to President Putin, and if he thinks that it's in his gain in order to keep someone who is a compliant agitator in place, then it's possibly in his what's the word? In his best interest, in order to sort of like be that silent sleeping partner.
Yeah. Well, we move to the other side of the world now, and Senate Republicans in the United States, including Mitt Romney, today lined up behind President Donald Trump's push to increase the US Supreme Court's conservative majority, leaving Democrats with little hope of blocking a confirmation vote on a successor to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg that could come before the November 3rd election. Trump said he had a pretty good idea of his choice for the seat in an interview on WGN America's News Nation program. He told reporters earlier, "We're getting very close to having a final decision made." The president has said he plans to announce his nominee by Saturday and has urged the Senate, where his fellow Republicans hold a 53-47 majority, to vote before the election. Trump has mentioned 2 women he appointed as federal appeals court judges as potential nominees: Amy Coney Barrett of the Chicago-based 7th U.S. Circuit Court and Barbara Lagoa of the Atlanta-based 11th U.S. Circuit Court. Trump met with Barrett at the White House on Monday and has said he may meet with Lagoa in Florida later this week. Chris, a lot of people in America were very bitter about the fact that the Senate Republicans refused a confirmation hearing on Merrick Garland, who was nominated by Barack Obama about 200 and some odd days before the election that brought Trump in. And yet here's Trump with barely a month to go until the election. People, in fact, have already started voting. And he's hoping to ram this through before the election happens. I wonder, what do you think what impact this might have on the actual outcome of the election, which, as we know, may very well end up in the Supreme Court?
Well, if it does inevitably end up in the Supreme Court, it would set a precedence for political gamesmanship throughout the world. We were just talking about Belarus there. You could also bring in the UK into that context as well. But what this is quite unashamable gaming of putting the correct people in place. People that won't buck the system. That's what Trump's trying to do. We see it with Boris Johnson. His cabinet is packed full of compliant individuals who are there in order to get their hands greased and have an easy ride. If Trump is to win another term, then there'll be plenty of brown envelopes getting passed from pillar to post, no doubt. And that's just my own take on it. The bribery and corruption that goes on within American politics has been long the subject of many a Hollywood movie and stuff like that. But this has all the hallmarks of a Hollywood movie that you could possibly just write the script I hate to use this phrase, but as a socialist, but cash in on the royalties, because at the end of the day, what we have to remember about Trump is the fact that although he's not a president, Trump first and foremost is a businessman, and he will do anything in order to help his business and help him when he is no longer in office. That is the forefront of Trump and everything that he does.
Mm-hmm. Well, we come back to Scotland now, and the Scottish Government is proposing to make changes to the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Bill to balance protection of vulnerable groups affected by hate crime with people's rights to freedom of expression. Ministers are proposing to amend the legislation which, if agreed by Parliament, would mean a conviction for new offences of stirring up hatred would be possible only where it was shown that someone intended to stir up hatred through their actions or behaviour. The alternative and lower threshold for an offence to be triggered, which is currently in the draft legislation, namely if someone's behaviour was likely to stir up hatred, is to be removed. There will be no change to the threshold for the existing stirring up of hatred offences for racial hatred. These offences have been in Scots law since 1986 and will remain in place. And Pinar, this has been quite a hot button issue for a number of people on all sides of the political spectrum. What do you think about this change that Humza Yousaf announced today?
I think it's it's another step that which needed to be taken to raise the issue and probably help people to report and stop such incidents. However, I feel like there's huge concerns around reporting of hate crimes initially. And this might be one of the reasons why, when you look at the statistics, that's when we might say that there is no hate crime or there is no high numbers of racism and racist incidents across the country. And one of them could be the case that because it does not get reported. And I have witnessed many times that when people want to report such incidents, the procedure is very long and it ends up the cases being closed. And once that happens, then it does not get reported. Then obviously that contributes towards the final and statistics of whether the number of cases across the country. I think there needs to be a lot of done in terms of in our education system, especially with the younger generation, and I would say potentially across the communities in terms of looking at different aspects of hate crime, prejudices, discrimination, also what we talked about tonight as well around asylum, refugees and immigration in itself. All these aspects contribute towards hate crime. And another big issue is around obviously sectarianism that actually posed in the law as well for hate crime, the prejudice and the discrimination towards the people, and this in itself is an ongoing issue, as you know, across Scotland that does not potentially sometimes get addressed. I do remember a few years ago, the Scottish Government had a big project and funding put aside to challenge this and to look at the root causes of this and how it could be changed at the moment. But it might be an area that needs to be revisited and potentially contributes, as I said, towards hate crime. But what I could say is at the moment, what we have seen with the Black Lives Matter movement and with a lot of protests taken across the cities in terms of saying that refugees are welcome here. It's great to see that in our cities. However, we still got lots to do. At the moment, I don't know if you have seen it, but a person who's from Afghanistan who has been seeking asylum for on and off for 12 years is on hunger strike. And he started the hunger strike a few days ago. I'm not sure if the hunger strike is today because there was some news about him getting limited leave to remain, but that was not confirmed. And this is still an ongoing issue for many people, as Chris has mentioned earlier as well. There's also the issue around not being able to work, and concerns around this is huge. And this could be one of the reasons why the hate incidents or the ideas amongst the communities is in place, because when obviously people are seeking asylum, the first thing that we hear from the general public is, oh, they're coming here to take our benefits, to take our jobs. But in reality, if you're seeking asylum, you're not allowed to work. And people are this on an ongoing basis. So I think the new bill or the new amendment is another step that needs to be taken. But another issue is I feel like there needs to be dialogue within the communities to talk about how to access this, how to do the reporting, and to build that confidence of that you should not stay silent if such incidents take place.
Yeah, far better. I think if we can all prevent the hate in the first place, then just have better ways to punish it afterwards. Yeah. But we do come to our final story now, and following the setting up of a dedicated Transport Scotland project team to undertake more detailed environmental and engineering assessment, as well as stakeholder engagement, 11 corridor options for the access to Argyll and Bute A83 project can be viewed from today on a new section of the Transport Scotland website. The potential options are being assessed by a new dedicated project team to determine a preferred route corridor by spring 2021. Now, Chris, for almost as long as I can remember, the Rest and Be Thankful has been a problem. It's been a difficult place to keep that slope stabilised. Do you think now we might finally be at a point where we can make a permanent solution to the problem?
I would love to think so, Kenny, but again, I think I've got the sword of Damocles hanging over my head tonight because I'm just so full of doom and gloom. I have to point out to the viewers that the Westminster power grab, if it is successful and goes ahead, will not just affect water. It won't just affect the various things that have been put in the media,
Yeah.
but it will also affect transport, and it will affect Scotland's right to actually even asphalt a road, let alone build a new one. So people need to wake up and smell the coffee pretty bloody quick, because projects that are necessity to Scotland's communities and Scotland's economy, such as the actual remodelling of the Rest and Be Thankful, will not be able to go ahead unless it has ratification by the Westminster government long after the MSPs actually, say that this is what we're going to do. It will need to get down to Westminster in order to get put through the House of Commons, in order for them to actually say, yes, okay, we'll allow you to, do whatever project, and here's the money for it. I know, yeah, well, actually, here's half the money for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people need to really, really start doing a wee bit of research into the exact nature of this pernicious bill that is going to prevent Scotland from doing things in the countryside which is necessary for our communities in order to thrive.
Yeah. And yeah, as we say, if you are in the Argyll region, or if you're interested in this, those options are all available now for consultation on the Transport Scotland website. But that is just about all we have time for tonight. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? But thank you very much to Pinar and to Chris, who, I mean, you might not have been having that much fun tonight, Chris, but it was good for me. And we'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. There would be no point making these shows if we didn't have an audience for them. So thank you very much for that. We do have to ask, if you're able to support us, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register, sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month makes a huge difference to what we're able to do here at Broadcasting Scotland. It is pretty much the only source of regular funding we have, so literally every penny goes into producing more programmes. It's how we keep going, it's how we keep the lights on. So if you are able to help, then please do. If you're not, then you can still make a big difference for us. You can follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. You can find our Facebook page and like that. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I should also remind you as well that we are available now as an app on the Amazon Fire Stick. If you use an Amazon Fire Stick, then you can just set Broadcasting Scotland as a favourite, and you can see all our shows on your big TV that way. And yeah, finally, if you'd like to get involved here, we mentioned earlier we're looking at perhaps a journalist coming to join us from the refugee community, but we will take anybody, whether you've got experience or not. You're more than welcome to come into Broadcasting Scotland and see what you can contribute to building a better broadcaster for Scotland. We are going to need more and more people as we grow, so do please get in touch with us if you have any interest in that. But that is absolutely all we have time for tonight. Gordon has a night off tomorrow, so I will be back again tomorrow. But until then, thank you once again to Pinar and to Chris. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night. Good night.
at co-op.com.